Now you're on the air.
Hi, welcome to my podcast. And we have a webinar that's really exciting for you today. I have my husband with me here to my right, and that's Dr. Nicholas John Boas. And I'm Lianne Boas. I'm a certified handwriting analyst, and I do handwriting assessments, which shows a person's character based on the way they do the swoops and swirls in their handwriting. And I will say that I've run into a lot of clients over the years who do certain things with their handwriting that causes them to get caught up in making poor decisions or having poor experiences in the workplace that really shouldn't be that way, or they come across someone else that they could get a little hint about if they were to have someone like me, a certified handwriting analyst, look at their handwriting. For instance, if you have a boss who's really sensitive to criticism about his or her work, I can see that in their handwriting. I can see it in your handwriting as well. There are up to 300 characteristics I can see in any handwritten sample. So what I want you to know is, except for your background in terms of your ethnicity, whether you're a male or female, unless you tell me that you are, or if you're of a certain age, I can't tell from the handwriting those three items. But essentially, everything else is up for grabs. I can see if somebody's got a certain talent. I can see if somebody's got a certain weakness, something that bothers them. I can see what people's beliefs are. I can see how they think, how they process information. I can see a person's level of intelligence, whether they're an exploratory thinker or if there's someone who's more grounded and they like the social activities in life. So there's so many different opportunities and applications for handwriting analysis. And I thought this would be a great way to do an introduction to give you a hint as to what you might be doing or your friends and family might be doing that sabotages your own success in love and career and all kinds of family relationships. It's amazing what you can understand about a person from their handwriting. Now, you can go to my website, handwritingcafe.com, if you want to see a little bit more about the background of handwriting analysis. I have a lot to cover here today, and I'm going to have several formats here. I'm going to do a slideshow for you so that you can see the information, and I encourage you to write comments on my Facebook Live site, and I will respond to them as appropriate and given time. Now, my husband Nick here will highlight some things too, so if you see anything and you want to comment while I'm talking, uh, please feel free to do that underneath the webinar podcast on YouTube Live, on my Facebook Live. You can go to YouTube too and see it there, but it's easier here on Facebook Live. Okay, now we have an hour, so we probably got 55 minutes now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a listing of the things that people do. This is the title of the program for those of you that have joined us. Surf into your new life. Find blocks to love and success in your handwriting. And I put that there with a Coca-Cola on top, and the woman looking so free is to find your freedom to overcome the challenges and obstacles that you create for yourself in your life. And it can be seen how you do that through the power of the subconscious mind and how you do your handwritten letters and words and sentences and paragraphs. So I thought it's like Coca-Cola. Handwriting analysis is the real thing. Okay, so we're going to start with communication skills. Now, your communication style can be seen in handwriting analysis. It can be seen in the O's and A's. One can see whether an individual's going to be honest or dishonest, if they're going to be more careful about communicating information, if they're going to be rather discreet and they could work for the FBI, or if they do something that sort of sabotages their own well-being in their interactions with others in the workplace and in love relationships. So let's go to our first section. Okay, now this one, self-deceit. First of all, it's not a horrible trait, but it is a trait that sabotages the best of us. So another thing I wanted to point out is, as I get into the beginning of this, you or your friends or family might do certain things. That's okay. When you do one or two or three of these traits that I'm going to show you, it's just a marker. It shows you how you can improve your life by changing your handwriting, which is probably another class or an individual coaching session with me. But essentially, I want to show you the subconscious things that your mind is showing you. Your handwriting is your own best friend. So self-deceit is shown by see the loop on the upper left corner there? Basically, when a person makes the A and they make a large loop on the left or even a small loop on the left, and then it's clean on the right, that means self-deceit. The loop denotes imagination. And what the person is doing is they're imagining how to avoid negative information and negative thoughts and feelings. So that is how self-deceit shows up in handwriting. Usually this can be shown in really, really nice, wonderful people. So don't take this, if you do this or someone else does this, don't say this is the end of the world. It's just an indicator that you might be a perfectionist. You don't want to look at the negative shadow side of life. You don't want to face up to your own realities of making errors. So that's why I say it's often in the handwriting of perfectionists. Not exclusively, but usually that's the case. Okay, so let's go down to the next communication vowel. Now this is similar, but see how the loop is on the right-hand side of the A? Now this loop is a little smaller, so it just means there's less imagination involved. The larger the loop, the more the imagination. But here, when it's closed at the top and there's the right-hand loop, that means it's a person who's very discreet, secretive. They can be a really, really good friend in the sense that they'll keep your secrets just that, very private. This is not a gossipy personality, and this is not a person who's going to be unhealthy in terms of keeping secrets, but it can work against you. It can sabotage you because people don't maybe trust you, or they think that you're like too standoffish or aloof. So it's not necessarily how you are internally, it's how other people are also perceiving you, let's say in the workplace. So if I had a person who worked for me, and I used to be a manager at a college, so if I had a person who worked for me who had this trait, I would say, this is a person that's going to keep things confidential. So you would give them the confidential material. But let's say this has to be a person in a role that requires talkativeness. It requires you doing some sales work. Well, you're probably going to sabotage yourself because you value keeping things very under wraps, not expressing yourself openly with others, especially strangers, and not giving away your intimate thoughts and feelings and your truth. So you have to learn to get used to a person before you actually open up. So this can sabotage you, even though it's not an unhealthy characteristic in itself. It depends on the environment you're in. So let's move to the next slide. This one. There's no way of getting around this one, folks. If you or a friend or a family member or a boss does this, this is, in handwriting analysis, this is the pathological liar. By pathological, it basically means that the individual is not even probably aware that they're doing this to the extent that they do in terms of lying and telling stories. In other words, they don't need to be telling lies all the time. But for some reason, they don't feel safe telling the truth. That's what I have found with most of the clients I've dealt with over the years and with individuals that I've consulted with. And as a person feels more safe to tell the truth and that the truth is okay to speak, you will find that their handwriting will become more open and it will not have those double loops that connect in the middle. Now, I exaggerated this one a little bit, but there are some O's and A's. This also is true for the A's where people do this. And you just can't trust what they're saying is the absolute truth, even if you're close to them. Even if it's you, you can work on this. So people don't trust you because eventually you're going to get caught up in your own lies, whether they be white lies or otherwise, and they just won't fully appreciate that you're going to be telling the truth. And I have seen this happen in a lot of CEOs and executives at high levels. And I think it is because they don't feel safe telling the truth, because employees in politics will tend to go after individuals who are at the top. So that is one of my theories. So this one is an important one. If a person does this just once or twice in a handwritten sample, it's a tendency. If they do it a lot all the time, that's a trait. And then that means that they are a liar and they can't help themselves. And they probably could use some counseling and support. And it is a fear-based trait. So they're fearful of telling the truth. They may have grown up in a home environment where it wasn't safe. So that is a self-sabotaging trait by all means. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, this one person, I sort of exaggerated this to make it a point. First of all, this is an A, and it's a little bit more angular. And see how we have this brace that starts the A and it moves up and then it comes around and down. Now, see where the brace begins. That usually means like someone's bracing themselves for something that's going to be negative in their lives. And oftentimes, people who do this have difficult home lives, or they had a difficult start in life as a child, or even as a teenager. And as a result, they feel defensive. They feel on the defense about people obligating them to support them and to do things for them. And there's sort of a feeling of resentment about that. And then the fact that there's a double line where it's covered twice, when it's coming back down, there's that double line there. That means repression. So the emotions are repressed. There's frustration about perhaps a trauma that might have happened as a child, and the person doesn't know that. But when you're in your day-to-day activities and your workplace, you may have triggers that happen now in your life that cause you to feel imposed upon like you did when you were a child. The subconscious mind is so powerful. And so you do have to keep in mind that handwriting analysis doesn't just show the present, it shows the past. And it shows how you may have accumulated some belief systems that are not serving your highest interests. And that's why it's sabotaging your current life, in your relationships, and in your career ambitions. It's just a really fascinating science. And I can show you the overprotectiveness is the fact that it's angular, that it's written over twice, and it sort of makes like a tent. And it shows a little bit of stubbornness too coming down in. So that's a person who's just really on edge. They're definitely going to be very cautious about trusting anyone, including themselves sometimes, but especially others. Okay, now we're going to move on. Now this is similar. This is the overly covered handwriting sample. And this is a person who, see the loop at the top? That loop at the top, it makes like a little bow. You know, that shows a person who is just gonna, it's like a tight mouth. Your mouth is gonna be closed. You're gonna keep everything really discreet. And these movements of the pen here and here create like a roof, if you will. Interestingly enough, a lot of architects and builders do this. So it's almost like they're covering themselves with shelter. And here's the base here of the O. But when you have that kind of tight loop, that's a tight-lipped person, and they're going to be a little bit too careful. So how does that sabotage you? Well, people may not feel that you're genuine. They might not feel like you're authentically sharing who you are with them in a social situation. Now, if you work for the FBI, frankly, this is an asset. So it depends on the environment you're in and who you're with and who you're talking to. The communication vowels are very important, but let's face it, it depends on who you're around and what your role is that will define the appropriate responses in a given situation. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, this is the opposite. First of all, there's no loops in this, which is good. It means a really straightforward person. But see how large the opening is for the top of the O? Um, the larger the opening in the O or the A at the top, particularly, or the side, the more talkative and chatty that individual is. You usually can't get in a word in edgewise when you're in communication with this person, whether you're standing next to the water bubbler at work, or if you're standing in a grocery line in the supermarket, or if you're in your neighborhood and your neighbor has come over to chat a few moments with you. This is a very talkative individual. They will tell you the truth, and if they gossip, they probably will tell the truth because there's no loops, there's no embellishments, and so they're just totally out there. And they might be an entertaining kind of personality because they like to talk, they like to share information. They might be an educator who really likes to help people be informed about information. So it's not a negative necessarily, except for the shy introverts and the individuals who really don't want to spend the time listening to a story about their dog or about their children or about whatever interests the person who is writing this kind of letter O. So talkativeness, given again in the right environment, can be fine. If you're giving a sales pitch, this is the kind of person that you want to have talking for you. But if you're really more involved in the day-to-day social interactions, it can get really a little dicey if you're talking too much. So if you do this, just calm it down a little bit, depending on the environment, of course. Okay, the stinger. This is like really one of the most sabotaging things that a person can do to themselves, and they don't even know that they do it. And I had sort of a hard time making this myself because I don't have this trait. Now, the stinger in handwriting analysis is defined by, see this wave, and then it comes back down? That movement right there over the O and then coming back in, and it comes to a point there, and then it comes up and it goes off. And there's a little flourish there, so that means sense of humor. But here on the left, it's like that wave that goes over an O and A. A lot of people do it with the letter lowercase c. A stinger means you're attracted to that bad boy or that bad girl, and it sort of relates to the image that I had for this particular session. You're going to really not be attracted to the person who's less of a challenge. It's a really interesting trait. It usually means that as a child, maybe you had a dominant mother or father who were taking control. And as a result, you had a little bit of resistance to that person, but yet you're still attracted to them because they're your parent, the opposite sex. So it's the stinger relates to how you're attracted to the opposite sex or not attracted, as the case may be. So if you have a boss who's male and you're female and your boss does this as a handwriting gesture in consistent ways through their signature and or the regular writing, even on a post-it note, you're going to know that this boss of yours is going to focus more on the men in the group and what they think about a particular project. They're going to give more credence to the men. I guarantee you it might be subtle depending on other aspects in their handwriting, but it's there. Okay, and if you're dating, that's something to look for big time. If you find someone you're really attracted to and he or she does this, just be aware that they're attracted to you because they think you're a challenge. And when you're not a challenge and you're boring, they're going to drop you like a hot potato. So that's one of the things that I wanted to point out. Okay, let's move on to the career viewpoint. Now, the career viewpoint, there's so many ways that you can see how a person views their career based on handwriting analysis. There's a lot of different things that I look at as a certified professional in this field, but the letter T denotes more characteristics that are of interest about one's career than anything else. So I have a number of letter T's and one letter D that I'm going to have you do. I have 11 here, so I'm going to race pretty quickly through these. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to say, you know, what you have as a question, and I'll try to get to you. The T here It starts here, goes up, and then it goes around and down to the left. And that's a self-castigation. Self-castigation means that you're your own worst enemy. You are going to condemn yourself for mistakes and errors that others wouldn't even think of necessarily. And even if they did think of it, they wouldn't be half as hard on you as you are on yourself. Again, this could be a trait of somebody who lacks some self-esteem, but it could also be a person who's that perfectionist that just doesn't feel like they have it perfect and they don't have it right. Usually it's a lack of self-esteem, though. Now, the other thing is that self-castigation movement of the pen, it's going to the left, and the left always means the past. So usually when people do this about their career, they've had some bad experiences in their past, and maybe not entirely related to the career, but most likely. So go light on them. If they do just this and they don't do all the other characteristics I've been showing you in a sample, then it could be that they just really need a little bit more boosting and self-confidence to feel better about their work product and service. This one is really, really difficult to deal with. They're paranoid about criticism of their work and or their ideologies. Ideologies meaning their philosophies, how they view life. Now, the paranoia is basically somebody who just, they look at you and you look at them the wrong way and they get really, really defensive. They think you're criticizing them when you aren't. If you're in the workplace environment, and this is where this gets the most dangerous, I exaggerated this T, but there are a few people that make T-bars like this. It looks like the Toyota Camry or Toyota Valera T, where it's very looped. And that means the loop is the imagination. So they're imagining that you're criticizing them. And then there's the horizontal T-bar that goes through. So if you have a boss that does this, and I have had that situation in my past, just steer clear of giving what you even perceive to be constructive criticism to that boss. They will not listen. They will jump to the immediate defensiveness. They won't like you because you'll create pain in them internally. You may not see it because their slant here, and that's another thing we measure in handwriting analysis, is slightly to the right. So they're not going to express themselves openly about their fears and frustrations, especially if they're your boss. So just be aware, if you do want to learn how to deal with this person, or if it's you, you should just maybe work on getting some personal coaching as to how to not feel so concerned about what everyone else thinks about your work product. If it's your boss that does this, realize you can't change him or her, but what you can do is when you feel that they do a good job, let them know that. This kind of person is hyper vigilant, so they'll know if you're just, rubbing up to them to make them feel better so that you can do well in your work. So just be sincere with this person. They're hurting on the inside. They feel very sensitive to criticism. Prideful about work. This is an individual. See how high the stem is on this one? And there is a lope. So, they're a perfectionist. There's a little tension at the top because it's a point. And that shows that an individual who has very high idealistic views. They can be a very spiritual person, very enthusiastic about their career. See how long the crossbar is? That always means somebody who's like really enthusiastic about their work. But their pride really gets in the way sometimes. So if, again, someone criticizes this individual, they're going to take it to heart, and they probably won't forget, because usually people who make really high prideful T-bars like this are very intellectual. They're individuals who like to learn new information. They're very exploratory in their thinking, and they feel passionate about what they do because of that long crossbar. So if it's you, just be aware. Your pride can go before the fall. And if it's your boss, just recognize that prideful self of the individual and recognize for what it is, and don't get too caught up in what they might get sensitive about. You have to learn how to find your own grounding with this kind of T-bar in a boss particularly, but a coworker. Okay, so let's move on to the next. This one is a real tough one. The person's sensitive to criticism about their personal life matters. So if you tell a person that, gee, Susie, you may have decided to wear a different color blouse today for this meeting, you are going to get a very internally prickly kind of response, or it'll be cold. This person, again, is very sensitive. They're sensitive to their personal life decisions being questioned too. So if within the family environment, this comes up a lot. The larger the loop on the uppercase D, the more imaginative that person is that others will criticize him or her for the choices they make in life, whether they decide to date somebody or whether they decide to socialize with an individual, or whether they decide to go to live in a certain place in the country or move out of the country. If someone brings it to their attention that they shouldn't have made that decision, they're going to get really bristle. And that can definitely detract from a positive, trusting relationship, and it sabotages you in the long run. Okay, we're going to move fast here. Now, the T-bar, stubborn enthusiasm is what I wrote here. And by stubborn, I mean there's an inverted V in the base here of the T-bar, and that shows stubbornness. They're going to hold on to their own views. They're not going to listen to what everyone else has to say about their decisions. They're going to move forward, and they're not going to be too open to new facts unless they really, really see information that's going to change their mind. The enthusiasm is a long crossbar that I mentioned prior. So they're stubbornly enthusiastic, which can be really hard if you don't agree with them. So if you're an employee for this person, just go with the flow. The person has a lot of pride as well because it's a tall T. So there's a few things in this one that would show a way that a person can sabotage themselves, especially if they're not the boss and they're so enthusiastic and they think their way is the right way and the boss's way is different. And that's not going to be a good move. Okay, let's move on to the next. Stubborn visionary. A visionary person is the one who makes a high T-bar crossbar, and see that space in between? That space means the person is not necessarily so practical. They're pie in the sky in their thinking. They have a very high T. And again, it sort of makes a stubbornness here. And it indicates a person who has an optimism, because see, the crossbar is moving on an upward trend, but it also shows an individual who needs people around them who are going to be more practical, who will make the crossbar halfway or 2/3 up on the middle of the vertical stem. So if you do this, you're a great visionary. You have ideas other people don't think of. You can really bring a lot to a work group, or even at home, you have a vision for a new idea as to how the family should proceed in solving a problem. But people don't appreciate it unless you can put it into action. And so that's where you're sort of a little too pie in the sky and it can work against you. Okay, let's move on to the next. Lack of career purpose. A lot of us have this, and I get a lot of questions as a handwriting coach about the lack of purpose. What's my purpose, Lianne, is what people ask me. And I do have coaching that I do in that purpose to show people what their talents are and where they reside. When someone does this bow, this concave bow here in the T-bar, it's in the middle of the T stem. That's okay. That's more of a practical person. But the bow shows sort of like a bending to other people's purposes for you, and you're not necessarily assured of yourself. So the more you go straight across, the more firm you are about your life career purpose. Okay, let's move on to the next. Now, this is a real that procrastination can really affect somebody. Procrastination is a trait that, see that left hand stroke? It goes off the vertical stem and there's a space there, and then it goes to the left. That's procrastination. You're in the past. You're not really moving forward, which is the right side of the paper in handwriting analysis. So it shows an individual who is not going to be proactive in moving forward and getting things done. In fact, you might be if you do this yourself, you might be the one who doesn't want to take the garbage out when it should be. You don't want to plan ahead. You like to do things on the cuff. And it can work against you, particularly in the workplace, but also at home. So keep that in mind. Okay, now on the other extreme, there's the explosive temper. Now, the explosive temper can be shown in several ways, but it shows in the T-bar significantly when there's a high flying stroke. It just sort of flies off the vertical stem and it never connects to the vertical stem. The explosive temper shows that the person lacks some control, that they're very compulsive, and let's face it, the workplace in particular can get very, very stressful. And when you get under time deadlines and you have personalities that you have to cope with, and if you have a strong right slanted handwriting, and this one is slightly right slanted, you know, your emotions get the better of you, and you do that. You just slice through the air with this horizontal stem that really flies off the vertical stem. It never touches it. If it touched it, that's more of a planner. So like there's really nuances in handwriting analysis that can change a determination of what it means. But if you do this yourself, or your boyfriend does this, or girlfriend does this, watch out. They really are a compulsive person, and they might have a hard time controlling that, and maybe could use some support emotionally from you, but also perhaps from professionals. And I beg you, if you see these traits in someone that you know, or a coworker or a boss, please don't say, "Oh, Lianne Boas said this," and da, 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 da. Just keep it inside, because a little bit of information can be dangerous, as you know, and you don't want to sabotage yourself further. I'm giving you hints as to what to look for in yourself and others to get yourself to overcome these challenges and these weaknesses, perhaps, that you have in your own character. Let's move on to the next one. Low self-esteem. Now, low self-esteem is probably one of the worst traits in terms of getting yourself ahead. You know, when the horizontal bar is low on the stem, that's low self-esteem. The higher the bar goes, the more dignified the person feels, the more self-confident they feel about their work quality, about their projects, about their ideologies, and about themselves ultimately. So if you have a low T-bar that just goes really low on the stem, it's usually below the halfway mark. It could be a third of the way up the stem. Then what you just do is you bring the stem up, and you do that for 3 or 4 weeks. It's called graphotherapy. And you actually sort of rewire your brain to think in terms of more positive self-esteem. But low self-esteem can get in the way in several ways, not just the T-bar, and that could be for another topic, but that can block you. It can block your success, and that's part of this dialogue here. Okay, let's move forward. Dominating. Oh, wow. We all know the dominating person in the workplace. They have the T-bar that goes straight down from the left to the right. That's a dominating person. And that's fantastic if they're the lead sled dog and they happen to be the person who's in charge of an operation. And if they happen to be in a work environment where a dominating authoritarian person is going to be more productive and more revered by the leadership. But often there's a resentment that comes from the coworkers and from the individuals who are working for that individual. So just be aware, if they do this, that's who they are. They feel comfortable taking control. So if this is a person who reports to you and they do this, well, then give them something they can be responsible for, where they can take charge and do a good job. Of course, you don't just want to give it to the person that has no experience in what you're doing, but it's something that you could hook into as a really good resource that you may not have known about otherwise without this demonstration. Okay, sex and money. Okay, sex and money, those are hot topics. Okay, let's move on to the first. Now, in handwriting analysis, the Y's, G's, and J's and Z's are the ones that show what we call the lower zone of the handwritten movement. And that is the loops of these bottoms letters. And this Y shows, because it's so small and it nowhere comes up to what we call the baseline, which is up here, the bottom of the Y scoop, that shows clannishness. It shows a person who's only going to be close to a very, very few people. They really don't feel comfortable going outside their little comfort zone. And they're a person who's going to be close to maybe one or two or three family members, and they don't want to go outside their circle. So if you're involved in a sales environment, for instance, this is not the person to hire to go out and make cold calls, or to go out into the environment whereby they have to make public presentations off the cuff about a particular product or service. So if you're clannish yourself, it's your choice, it's your personality. But if you wanted to feel more confident going out in the social environment, you would bring your loop back up with what we call the baseline, which I'll show in a moment. Okay, this one is tough. Distrustful of intimate relationships. It's really, really difficult for this person to truly trust a partner, a life partner. They've been hurt in some way, most likely. It's shown here in the Y. They come down and then they retrace. It's the retracing. It's the repression of hurt, frustration, betrayal maybe in the past. And then they might come up and there might be a little spread between the first downward stroke and the upward stroke. But basically, these people find it very hard to trust others. And I had a gentleman who worked for me many years ago who did this. And it was very, very hard for him to maintain his intimate relationship with his wife. And part of the reason was he just couldn't open himself up. And I think there were issues, of course, like all of us have. But I think the result of this is that he couldn't open to her and express his true emotional and affectionate feelings in the way that she wanted him to. And of course, maybe even in the way he wanted to. And it could go back to childhood and teen years that he developed this lack of distrust for people because of experiences he ran into. Wonderful person, by the way. So just that one trait doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you're fearful of expressing your intimate thoughts and feelings with a partner. Unfulfilled about money and or sex. This person, see how it dangles the lower part of the G? Just hanging out there. That's a feeling of unfulfillment. There's no closure. If there were closure, the loop would come all the way back up to what we call the baseline. So that's something that we call graphotherapy, where you can literally work on the letters that you make in order to change your life. But again, that's another way of addressing the concern that we have right here in front of us. But the awareness in the first place is what helps a person figure out how they sabotage themselves. This also says, I'm frustrated sexually. I'm not interested in, well, I am interested in a relationship, but subconsciously there's something that's keeping you from wanting to take that risk and that action to have an intimate partner. Okay, now this one is really interesting. Don't we all do this? We get so close to our financial goals, our career goals, getting promoted, and then at the last second, something just sort of drops out on you, and you're like, what the heck just happened to me? And this is typical in the G. See the little space there from that loop coming up? That is the space that says, I'm not worthy. I just can't get to, I never win. People use phrases like that. You can't win. Everything happens to me. It's sort of like a Charlie Brown ending, where he's close to hitting the ball and he just can't quite pull that off. And that is the person who just gets so close to their goals and they're fully capable of reaching them and being really satisfied and happy. But that little gap says, I'm not so sure I'm ready to be successful. Okay, this person feels a lack of money and or intimate relationships. See the large gap here between the bottom of the G and here? That shows frustration. That simply shows frustration. And when you send frustration out to the world, you're really telling the universe that you're not worthy of being successful. you're telling them you need more. You're telling the universe you need more things to be frustrated about. So the universe, through the law of attraction, gives you more events and activities that cause you pain and cause you frustration about money and intimate relationships. So if you address the fact that you want to feel good and you care about how you feel, and you start changing the way you write your letters, believe it or not, if you do this for a month and you pull it the loop openly and healthily up to the top, you'd find that you start to attract better money and better intimate relationships. Felon's claw. It sounds just really, really bad, but there are a lot of people that do a felon's claw, so please don't think I'm going to throw someone in jail if I see you or someone else that you submit for your handwriting that has a felon's claw. Felon's claw. The person feels guilt. The person feels a frustration and guilt, and it relates often to the past. And depending on where in the handwriting it shows, this is a letter J. It can mean the person is underhanded, that they feel like because they need to be punished, that they'll do things that are not necessarily rational just so they will be punished. That guilt drives them to do that. So it's sort of like a legal kind of thing, like a lot of prisoners are showing these traits in handwriting analysis. There's been studies on this, but it's the guilt that's driving this. And it can go back to childhood and the teen years and the young adult years. It doesn't have to be something that's going on now in your life, but you attract that to you. You attract situations where you're going to get punished for things that, frankly, you don't have to be involved in. Okay, healthy optimism. I'd like to show you a positive, healthy movement of the pen. See the J? There's a little I dot on there, but it's hardly able to be seen. But when you go above the baseline with this loop, and this is a pretty healthy loop, that shows an individual who's very upbeat. Whenever you see handwriting going on an upward stroke, that means an optimism. It means the person sees the glass half full. And that attracts, through law of attraction, many positive opportunities and breaks and good things coming to a person. You ever wonder why one person does so successfully and another one, like they could be really bright and capable and determined and great worker, but the one who does this is probably going to attract more positive events in their life. It's through the law of attraction, in my opinion, but it's really showing an upbeat attitude. They see the glass half full and they're going to go for it. Downheartedness. Okay, this means two things, but downheartedness is what I wanted to show. This Y, first of all, shows a lot of imagination. See how large and wide the Y is? And it goes down pretty far. So there's a drive. There's a sexual drive that's there. The sexuality of an individual does show in the lower aspects of a Y, G, J, and Z. Now, this downward last-minute trend is very similar to what I said before about where the gap was really small at the end. The person they sabotage themselves at the last second. Like they don't get the client they want. They don't get the relationship they want. The boyfriend or girlfriend breaks up with them. They have this pattern where if they do this all the time in their handwriting, not just once or twice, that's a tendency. But if it's a trait, they really cut off their own opportunities through their negative attitude. Obstinate. Doesn't want to be told what to do. Whenever you see angles, triangles in handwriting, no matter where it is, that's an obstinate person. They can be really bright because they like challenge. They tend to be the people who want to be known for their intellect. They do things differently. But when it's in the lower zone of the handwriting here, which is what we call the lower zone, the bottom of the Y, that triangle, it does move up, but look at how much space is here. So that shows a frustration, but they can show obstinacy and anger. They can show a resentment if you try to tell them what they should do in bed sexually. They're going to resist it. And that's a sabotaging characteristic by all means. And they're not conscious necessarily of what they're doing, but it definitely is a strong trait. So if you see this in your boyfriend or girlfriend, just be aware. They're not going to they want to take control. They're more dominant. Sexual frustration. And because this loop goes to the left, it goes to the past, that person likes to be taken care of. See how it makes a little bit of a cradle? And they never forget about the sentimental things about the past. And that could be a really fine trait. There's nice roundedness, and see there's an openness there. So they're open in terms of their intimacy and talking about how they feel. But they've had a lot of disappointments in life, and so they're frustrated. They can't seem to get that relationship that they really want. And you're sending that out to the universe when you're thinking that way, and that's what the handwriting is revealing for you. Remember I said your handwriting is your best friend? Well, it's your best friend. It's showing you that you want to be taken care of. Okay. The why doesn't define oneself by being partnered, likes time alone. If you do this or someone else you know does this, they like their own time. They are very determined, straight Y down, no loop. And they're a person who's not necessarily going to define themselves by a partnership. They might be perfectly happy being happy and single as an adult. Okay. The romantic style. I'm going to race through these because we're running out of time here. Independent. I just said that a moment ago. Very independent character. No matter what they do, they want to do things on their own. They like their own company. They don't have to fill up their social life necessarily. It doesn't mean they're not social, but it means that they like their alone time. Sexual frustration again, I just showed it through a few different examples. See that scooping? That means that they're feeling, it's hanging out there. There's no closure. The closure would be as if the loop came back up to what we call the baseline. So if you formed it like this. And I'll show you a few other examples in a moment. And then the obstinacy, again, I just wanted to give you a few examples. See, when you have hooks in handwriting, I purposely did this. Hooks mean a person can hook you into their agenda. So if you go to a local bar and you meet a person who does this, just be aware they're like really clever at pulling you into bed for a first night date. So just be careful. It doesn't mean everybody does that who does this with their handwriting. It just means they're really good at getting you into their agenda, and they can be quite charming about it at the same time. Okay, this is viewed as more of a healthy sexual drive, a person who has a bit of imagination and healthiness and openness to different kinds of people. The more large the handwritten loop of the Y or the G or the Z or the J, the more open to different kinds of people they are, but it's not bloated. So it's a nice fluid movement as well, and it goes on an upbeat track. So I wanted to show you what looks healthy. So if you do this, you're really not doing anything wrong. If you do this with most of your Y's and G's, it's a really healthy approach to life, and you have a healthy physicality and material imagination, and that includes money too. Enthusiastically romantic. See how high up that stem goes after they do the loop? First of all, they come back up to the baseline, but see how high up that goes? That's a real imaginative person. They have an abstract mind, and they probably imagine romantic endeavors in their mind, very pie in the sky thinking, and one could accuse them perhaps of being a little too pie in the sky at times, but ultimately it's a real enthusiastic personality, and they're probably going to be very attractive to other people because of this. Okay, this is more the selective individual. It's like the clannish person I showed before. The Y particularly shows that. See how narrow-minded this is? That's what that means. It's sort of a person who's very narrow about who they're going to bring into their mind, into the social circle. And that's true here too, but this circle is a little bit more open, so the family might have a few more people involved. But ultimately, they're very selective. They're not going to play the field. They're not going to be disloyal to you, most likely, unless they show some other traits in other letters and formations. This is a driven person because the amount of drive is in the downward trend. See how far down they go? And then they come back all the way up. But I will say it's more narrow. So they're going to be narrow about their selection of who they socialize with in an intimate way. And there's nothing bad about that. It's just saying if you do this, you could sabotage yourself by not being open to different ways of thinking and living and being. You're more conservative, as simple as that, and that's who you are. So it's not a bad trait. It's just showing that if you had someone with you who was very liberal minded, you might not get along as well in an intimate relationship. Like this one. This is the sexually imaginative person. This person can also be a little gullible. See how large and wide the loops are? We call those money loops, by the way, in handwriting analysis. I don't know if you remember the old cartoons where they used to have the dollar sign in the middle. I can't draw it right here, but I'm doing it with a cursor. So basically, this person is very imaginative. They have strong interests in the physicality. They can be very sensual. They love great food. They love social friends and friends from all kinds of backgrounds. If they have a party, they're going to have people from all different backgrounds. They're not going to go with just one type of person like the previous slide. Downheartedness about a relationship. When you see that movement that goes down in the pen, see? It goes down like that at the end. That's saying I'm feeling pretty down about my marriage or my love relationship, my partnership. It also has another meaning, which is not the same. And the second meaning is you can have a fear of success. So in other words, you're going up, you're ready to achieve your goal and make your money, and then all of a sudden you get downhearted. So it can be downheartedness about money as well and about accomplishing your goals in the career and workplace. So if you do this, all you have to do is start going on an upward trend. Stop doing that sagging loop at the end. That's all you need to do, folks. Okay, and upbeat about romantic relationships. I think I've mentioned this before, but if you do this for all of your handwriting, samples of the Y's, G's, J's, and Z's as well, which is not here, you can be very optimistic, and that positive attitude is going to attract more people to you. You'll be a magnet. Because you're feeling better about yourself and you're feeling better about your relationship with others. The other thing I would point out is see that little J dot? That shows loyalty. And so that's a person who can be very loyal in a romantic relationship. So don't worry if they do this and they're very successful and everybody wants to be around them. That little I dot that's very rounded will show the loyalty. Isn't that fascinating? I think there's so many things that I can show you. And again, this is a kind of thing that I haven't really been able to show a lot of people, but with the internet, we have opportunities to help you help yourselves in significant ways. And all you need to do is contact me at Handwriting Cafe in order to find out, more ways that you can change your handwriting or move your handwriting in such a way that you'll be able to be successful again. Now, we have one more here, sexual guilt. This one, it's the felon's claw that I had mentioned up above, and this really wreaks havoc on relationships. It can wreak havoc in the workplace because if you do this, you want to be punished, you feel guilty about something. It's a very subconscious thought. It's a very subconscious trait. And you have no idea that your powerful subconscious mind is really doing you in because you might be told by your boss to do one thing and then you go off and you do another thing. And the reason is you're not feeling good enough about yourself. You're feeling guilty about something. And so you feel you need to be punished by your boss. And sometimes that punishment comes in the form of being fired or being put on probation or whatever. So just if you do this, a lot of teenagers do this because there's an immaturity about their sexuality and they feel guilty about it. But I'm talking a little bit more right now about the person who's more mature in age. But emotionally, they're back to being maybe a 12-year-old. I'm not giving an exact date, but I'm just saying early teens when you start to develop some feelings and emotions about your own sexuality and you feel guilty and it's never addressed, it's never counseled, and as a result you're into the self-punishment thing, and that's not healthy for you. So if you do that, you're probably a very sensitive soul and you just need some support. And so I would give the disclaimer, if you do this and other traits through this handwriting sample, be aware that if I've covered a number and you have them, or someone you love has them, get them some help or get yourself some help. I am not a medical physician. I have a background in human development psychology from Harvard University. So I know what I'm talking about, but I certainly don't have all the answers. And I would feel much more comfortable if you would go to your medical physician or practitioner, or a healer that you trust, that knows you, for some in-depth counseling. But if there's something that you can just change one little letter, that will help significantly. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed my presentation about the things, the letter formations that cause problems in your lives, and their subconscious mind, like I said, and the conscious mind is very powerful. And so there are things that we may not be aware we're doing to ourselves and one another. So that's a way of becoming more aware. And just by becoming more aware, you're able to handle um, creating a new life for yourself and changing the letter formations into more positive ones that would denote more positive meanings. And that's called graphotherapy. And again, you can go to my website, handwritingcafe.com, and my Handwriting Cafe Facebook, and learn more about handwriting analysis and how it can help you and how I can be a life coach to you if you choose. Now, this particular course that I'm working on right now, Bosses, Bullies, and Bears, oh my, recognizing the jerks in the workplace. Stay tuned to this channel, and I will be promoting on Eventbrite and some other locations, possibly Periscope as well, to alert you to the workplace specific issues that may come about and how you could navigate yourself within the workplace for real positive success and a feeling of accomplishment and compensation too. So I look forward to hearing more from you, and I look forward to working with you perhaps. And my husband and I have really enjoyed putting this together. Nick has been a great support to me, and I think we've had a really fun show here. And I don't know if we had any comments. People are pretty shy today. But if I put it up again and people want to comment, then they can do so. That's the great thing about this technology. I can teleport myself to anywhere in the world, really. As long as I can understand the English language, they understand mine. I do parties and special events, fundraisers for those that are looking for support. I do all kinds of little lectures and presentations, and I love to do individual readings and help people understand what's going on in their lives and how they can improve their well-being. I do have a website too called Handwriting Healer, which I'm working on right now, and that's for people who are feeling maybe physical symptoms, the mind-body illness they call it, or mind-body syndrome, chronic fatigue syndrome, things like that. Mystery illnesses where the doctors have done all the tests and they just can't find out what's wrong with the individual, and there's nothing coming out negative, which is a really good thing, but it's so frustrating to the client, the patient, who's trying to figure out, why am I feeling so fatigued? Why am I in pain? Why am I not able to get back to work and feel productive and full of vitality? And sometimes the subconscious beliefs that are shown in the handwriting can act as clues to lead you on your awareness as to what's perhaps contributing to your illness. I'm not saying I'm a medical doctor at all, but I'm saying between doctor appointments, maybe I could be of assistance to you. And there's also another aspect of handwriting analysis that I like to look at, and that's career advice. We have our talents, and you can see talents that are in people's handwritings. And so I can give some advice to people who are looking to make career changes and who are looking to do things that are new with their lives. Maybe they're tired of the career they've been in for 20 some odd years and they want something new, but they don't know what to do. So maybe just that confirmation from me as a certified handwriting analyst would help you in making some decisions for yourself about what's the next best step. And then finally, yes, I can see criminal tendencies in handwriting analysis. So I can be of assistance with legal consultants and people who work with those who have a criminal mind or who have been finding themselves in that kind of situation. Now, I don't want to end with a negative belief system here. I think handwriting analysis is a very upbeat quality. It's an expertise that's been in existence since the 1980s, actually back to Aristotle, right, Nick?
Right.
And I think, handwriting analysis can really give you the clues that you need to overcome the weaknesses and the challenges and the false beliefs that maybe you've internalized since you were a child. Well, thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this show. And if you have any questions after the fact, please feel free to go to my Handwriting Cafe website. And my name is Lianne Boas, and my
And I'm Nick.
husband, Nick. And we look forward to our next lecture, and I hope we'll see you there. And again, thank you for viewing, and have a good afternoon. Take care. Bye-bye.